Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. So welcome everyone. Thank you for coming along to this data access workshop for growing up in New Zealand. We're particularly targeting this at the Children and Families Research Fund applicants who are coming through for our round 6. We're really grateful to have MSD here today to talk about the fund in a bit more detail. Alana's going to talk first up about that. And a very warm welcome to you all. Please come on in. So we've got quite a large number of people here on campus, which is great to see, the interest in this fund. And then online, we've got 24 participants as well. So very welcome, very warm welcome, sorry, to you all as well. So if I just take you through what we're going to do this morning. So as I said, Alana will start us off with an introduction to this Children and Families Research Fund, and talk a bit about how you can build policy collaborations, which is a really important part of the fund. Then Professor Susan Morton is up next. She's our Foundation Director of Growing Up in New Zealand. She's going to give a nice history of the study, an introduction to all of the amazing data that's there included in this study, and talk about the researchers' responsibilities under our kaitiaki and guardianship principle. Then it's my turn, and I'm back up talking about the data that's available and getting quite specific about which tools we have available for you for this round. So when you're putting together your applications, you can know what's going to be there for you to draw on and all the technical documentation that sits behind. We've added in a morning tea break because we think that will be quite a lot for you to process up to that point. So for people who are here in person, we'll have some morning tea outside. And for those of you on Zoom, you can get a 10-minute break. Then we're handing over to Avinash Pillai, who's our biostats person at Growing Up in New Zealand. And he's going to talk you through the technicalities around the data dictionaries and our data user guides. We've got a Q&A session at the end, so all of us can then answer questions you have, so drop them down as we go through the workshop, and we're happy to answer any questions. There's also email contacts at the end that we'll give you, so you can get in contact with us. So I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Sarah Gerritsen, the Associate Director of Growing Up in New Zealand, and I'll introduce each of the speakers as we go through. So first up, we have Alana. Oh, and just before that, I would like to say a big thank you to the children and families in the Growing Up in New Zealand study before we get underway. They're always kind of in our minds when we're using this data. An incredible amount of whānau have given their time to work on this project right for over many, many years, and we're very grateful to them for all of the effort they put into helping us collect this wonderful, rich data set. Also, thank you to the Ministry of Social Development. Thank you to everyone here today from there, and the multiple government agencies that sit on our policy forum as well to help make sure that the data that's collected in Growing Up is relevant to policy. And we have advisory and stakeholder groups as well. If you're wanting to know more about those, they're often in our reports. Here's the latest one. Now we are 8. There's a bit more information about all our advisory groups. And just thanks to the New Zealand government for supporting this project over so many years, right from, well, Susan can go into that in a bit more detail, but right from the very start. So we'll now pass over to Alana, who's joining us by Zoom, and she will talk to the Children and Families Research Fund. Thank you, Alana.
Hi, so can everyone hear me okay? Yep, cool. All right, so I'm unsure if you can actually see me, but yeah, as Sarah mentioned, I'm Alana McGimpsey, and I am the administrator of the fund, of the Children and Families Research Fund. So I sit within the research and evaluation team at Ministry of Social Development. So yeah, thank you for all coming along today. We really appreciate the intake of this, and hopefully I'm able to answer a lot of your questions. First of all, I want to recommend that you all check out the Ministry Social Development website. On the Children and Families Research Fund page, we've actually updated a lot of the information on there, including the deliverable guidelines. The application packs now include the marking criteria, and it will also also on there there's a past application from a successful applicant. So you'll be able to see how they filled out their application, and it'll give you a greater detail of what the panel are looking for. So a bit of history of the fund. MSD took over from Suparu in administrating the fund in 2017, and this will be our 6th round of funding. The fund maximises the government's investment in the Growing Up in New Zealand study by supporting policy-relevant research using the GWINS data. So far, we have funded 32 research projects covering a wide range of topics, including infant feeding in New Zealand, social connectedness, screen time, multi-language retention, participation in early childhood education, housing-related experiences, and barriers to primary healthcare. A full list of our funded research is available on our website. As with round 5, this round, we'll also have 2 types of applications. The new user application, where applicants can get up to $75,000, which includes $5,000 for training to support and build capability of the research team. And the new user projects must be led by a principal investigator who has not previously conducted research using GWIN data. And then we also have the standard research grant, where applicants can get up to $125,000, and these applicants need to be high quality research projects that have been developed in response to or anticipation of government policy questions. For round 5, the split was 3 standard research applicants and 5 new users. How many are chosen for each grant is not set and can change depending on the calibre of the proposals. The panel are also under no obligation to allocate the full $750,000 of the annual funding. So I'll just go quickly through the funding process, like the stages. So these timeline is indicative. This year the application closes on the 26th of July. Funding applications will be assessed between August and September by the independent panel. We will hope to notify applicants late September, early October, and shortlisted applicants will be submitted to the GWINS Data Access Committee in November. And then all going well, all applicants, research projects that are approved, we aim to sign contracts in January with a research period of February 2022 up to 12 months. A new part of the assessment process is that all applications will be assessed by a GWINS data representative to check for data feasibility prior to the applications being assessed by independent panel. So they will make sure that the data that you are requesting is actually available and that it works, like it's feasible. The full marking, as I mentioned, the full marking criteria is available in the application pack, so I recommend having a look at that. But the biggest thing the panel look for when marking proposals is that you have a clear research question and objective. There's clear methodology. You have a named policy collaborator, and the application shows policy relevance and partnership. Cultural factors are taken into consideration and are clearly stated. That the principal investigator is meeting the 0.1 FTE requirement, and you're aware of timelines and ensuring you are realistic with those timelines. At the completion of the project, the aim is to publish the final report and policy brief. There is an opportunity for further dissemination, such as presentations and webinars. These are not expected or part of the contracts, but we want to be able to be promoting this fabulous work that researchers do. And so, so it's good to be able to see that in the application as well about how you would want to further disseminate your findings. And just finally, as one of the main criteria of the fund is the collaboration with policy, I know previous applicants have struggled in this area and it has shown in the applications themselves. So we really want to push that we are here to help, and that if you have any issues getting in contact with policy or getting in contact with a government agency, that we are here to help and we can help link you in with the right policy agents and individuals. So you can contact me at researchfund@msd.gov.nz. Yeah, that's so if you have any questions for me now, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, I can wait till the end.
Okay, thanks so much, Alana. That was great. Any questions for Alana right now, or can always come back to her? She's going to stay on the call anyway. So thank you. Okay, I'm going to pass over to Professor Susan Morton now, who's our Foundation Director at Growing Up in New Zealand, to give us a bit more detail about the background to the study. Thanks, Susan.
21st of June. I think we're on to the 1st of July, but kia ora tātou, and thank you, Sarah, and wonderful to hear from Alana to set this off. So add my welcome to those of you here and those on the screen, and exciting to be looking at round 6 of this, fund, which is wonderful. So my task is to briefly tell you about the sort of context of the study, really, which is really important when you're thinking about what research questions you might be able to answer, obviously alongside how policy relevant those questions are, which we've heard from Alana, and which you can see when you look down this set of research objectives as our number 5, which doesn't mean it's the most or the least important. It's actually really important that everything that we've done in the study to date has been designed to collect evidence that can inform policy. So the study context and research objectives have been set for a long time now. We do review them every now and then, but I think the key things about this is it is a population study. So we're interested in child development. And this is a study that is looking at how children are growing up in New Zealand today. So we're particularly interested in their trajectories of development. And that's actually really important because when you look at the data that is available to answer your particular questions, we are collecting information to understand change over time and what is influencing change over time. It is not a series of cross-sectional measures about prevalence at a certain time point on its own. It is about what is shaping development over time. So every time you look at data sets and you look at the data that is there, that is the underlying rationale that we apply to collection of data over time. And I'll talk to you a wee bit more about that on the next slide. We are very interested in a multidisciplinary view of child development. So we're not just interested in children's health and well-being, although that is critically important, particularly with the child, youth and family framework and wellbeing framework that is out there at the moment. It's critically important that actually we are able to address that, and that actually our framework, which you'll see next, aligns really nicely to some of the ideas that are sitting in that framework. But we are interested in children's development across multiple domains. So we'll show you those domain diagrams later. So it's basically a holistic look at what is shaping development, and it's development in the context of families and their wider environment. Again, you'll see that in the next slide. We're interested also, really importantly, in ethnicity in this study, and we'll talk about the kaitiaki principles at the end of this piece of the presentation. One of the things that this study was set up to achieve is to understand why we continue to see ethnic disparities and inequities really in outcomes for our children. They're unacceptable and they've been going on for decades. And despite best efforts to actually address those, we continue to see those in our child population. So one of the things that we have tried to do in the collection of this information and in the gathering of the people into this study is to be able to understand what is shaping those ethnic differences for children who are identifying with different ethnic groups. And I'll talk a wee bit more about that in a second, because ethnic identity is a really important construct in what we do, and it is quite complex. So it is important that you think deeply about that and ask us questions if you're not sure about what's going on with that, because it's certainly not one-dimensional. You can't just assign one ethnicity to each particular child, nor their families. It's much more complicated than that. So I'll talk about that in the next slide as well. As well as what doesn't work, because a lot of what we do in this sort of research is look at what goes wrong, and we're able to do that in this study as we can do with other studies and routine data sets. One of the things that sets this sort of study apart is because we engage directly with families and children, we can also find out what works. And that's really, really important for policy. It gives us a different lens than we're able to get from some of the other information that is out there about our children and families. So one of the things that we try and do is to understand strengths-based. We try and understand what is working for these children. So when you see the sets of questions, and we do try and use validated tools wherever we can, and you'll hear about those a bit more later. Often validated tools are designed actually to find what is going wrong. So we also try and search for tools that can sit alongside those and understand what is working as well. What is shaping resilience for these children over time? Because actually 80% of our children, according to their parents, are doing quite well. So we actually want to understand what's making a difference for them. Even those children who are experiencing adversity in their early life are still doing well. So we have the opportunity using this information, and you do as well, to actually understand that better, and that can be really helpful for policy agencies. So just keep that in mind as you look at the information too. And then we basically are interested, this is a longitudinal study, it's collecting a lot of pieces of information over time, and so basically we're interested in what is shaping development over that time period. And there are certain points in time where it's appropriate to look at different outcomes, and other points where we're really just collecting the baseline information to inform an outcome later. So as we think about, should we be looking at a research question, part of it is, how old are these children now? What is the quality and quantity of the information we've collected so far? And should we be looking at this question right now, or is it a question that we want to look at later? And so on. So those are sort of important things to think about too. And as I said at the beginning, and you heard from Alana, what's critically important about the way that we collect information for the study and the study itself is we are explicitly wanting to provide evidence about the lived realities of our children and families, and how that can be used at the policy table to inform strategies that are relevant to them and context relevant. So it's always something that we're trying to understand is what are the barriers, what are the enablers to engaging with services that are provided for these families, you know, what's working well for families, what's going wrong between the family table really and the policy table. So if we look at that, we can see it maybe better when we look at this conceptual framework. So this is a framework that is sat behind everything that we've collected in the study, everything that we think about in terms of how we collect the data, how we use the data, what sort of research questions are appropriate to ask of the data. And so this is our double puddle model, yes, it is a model, and that is the model that is sat behind everything that we've done from the beginning. Importantly in it, and I guess this is again about the data that you will see, it is reflecting the fact that the children are at the heart of this study. This is a study about child development. So we had 6,853 potential children at the beginning of this study. That has changed over time, and I know Sarah will take you through some of the way that that's changed. But the study is focused on the children. This is not a study of all parents in New Zealand. So if you're asking questions about parents and families, which you can do, you need to be aware that the cohort is generalisable to births, not to all parents. So just be aware of that. So it's a children-focused study, and we are interested in following their development over time. Absolutely, though, in the context of their families and the dynamics of their households and how those are changing. And this multidisciplinary, which I'll show you in the next slide in a little bit more straightforward cartoon, just again reinforces that every time we think about child development, we're thinking about it across multiple domains. So there are lots of questions that you can ask. And actually one of the advantages is you can ask them together. So it's not a siloed study, not just looking at education. It's not just looking at behaviour, not just looking at health. It's actually trying to understand how those things operate together. So that's actually really a strength, I think, of the data set too. The dynamic interactions, you can see some little arrows, I hope, on that double puddle model, let's get that right, is about the fact that children are not passive recipients of the environments around them. They are absolutely in dynamic interaction with the environments they are exposed to. So as well as measuring the development of the children from before they were born up until they were 8, which is the data sets that will be available for you, we're also measuring what is happening for their immediate environments, their proximal family environments, all the way out to that further a circle out or oval, which is the policy and societal context, and we're measuring each aspect of those different influences. So informal and formal connections to society, neighbourhoods and communities as well. And as well as what's happening for the children, the trajectories of development, we're interested in the trajectories of change for those environmental factors, which are inevitably impacting on the children too. So it does create quite a complex set of data. So it's really just giving you that sense of, that's what's going on. When you look at the actual data, all of these things are sitting in the context and have informed what we've done. Talked about understanding trajectories. Probably the most important thing, just to reiterate again then, is it means that we do not have repeated measures over time that you can just look at every data collection wave. We take a more nuanced approach to that, and you can see that on our website in terms of how we approach this, and we look at what is shaping change. So we will measure things when we think there has been sufficient change at a population level, or when the age of the child warrants measuring something again. So don't necessarily expect to see when you go into the data set and look at the perinatal, the 9-month, the 2-year, the 4-year, 72-month, and now the 8-year, that you will see the same measures every time. They are decided collectively by a group of experts and policy experts too about when it is appropriate to measure things. And I guess alongside that, important to say that when we go into the field, and we're there right now, testing how this goes, we always want to do more than we actually can. We have a limited time with families. We have to be aware of the burden of what we're asking them. So while we might want to have collected a whole lot of information about every single discipline or domain, we actually have to be a little bit cautious, and we have to prioritise what we collect. So you may not see some of the things that you expect to see. And we set all those out for you. Avinash will talk about those in the data dictionaries and where you find them. Sarah will talk about what's there at 8 particularly, but just be aware of that when you're going to the data sets and thinking about your questions. And again, as Alana said, the team here, very happy to help you and guide you if you're not sure and you want to know some more information about what might be in the data set and what might not, and why that is, and we're very happy to help you with that. I've talked about what works. Probably the most exciting thing about the 8-year, which you get a chance to interact with if you get through this process, or if you engage with the data set some other way as well, because there are other ways too, but this is a particularly exciting one, is at 8 we heard from the children directly. So we've got some direct voice information from the children. That's really exciting. It adds another dimension. It also creates more complexity, because we've basically got parental report of children's wellbeing up to that point, and then at 8 we have the children reporting for themselves. So let's just go to ethnicity very briefly, because it's a really important one. The parents selected the ethnic identity that they thought their children would identify with postnatally, right at the beginning of the study. And we got them to reiterate that over time. They also told us a whole lot about their own background and their identities. At 8, the children told us who they thought they were themselves for the first time. None of those things align. None of them. The parents don't agree. They don't agree with their child, and they don't agree at 8. Right, sometimes they do, but actually only in about half to 2/3 of the cases do we get complete alignment. So actually you need to be aware of that. You need to think about which variable you're going to use if you're thinking about ethnicity. And it's a really important variable, and don't just see it as unidimensional, because it's not. So there's some good pieces of work going on in the team, which you'll be able to access, that talk about ethnicity and how we think about it. And those pieces of work will be available on our website, and we can also direct you to our experts. So Fiona is in the room, which is wonderful, and she can direct you to our theme leads as well, who can also help. So we have a group of experts who can help you with that process. But it is really, really important that we don't just see ethnicity as a simple explanatory variable in this study, because it's not. Okay. All right, back to the beginning. So we did recruit 6,853 children, and they worked through their pregnant mothers. So the first piece of information we have is about the mums in pregnancy. And we recruited dads where there was a dad or a partner around. Not all mums had a partner, that was okay. We recruited the mums anyway. So you can see those numbers. And the first pieces of information we have in DCW 0 relate to the information that our mothers and partners provided us way back before their children were born. And then the children we actually didn't know, in fact, how many would be in the child cohort until 9 months, until the children were 9 months old, because it was a potential cohort, and that potential cohort had 6,853 children. And then over time that has, there's been some attrition, which Sarah will talk to you about. As I said with ethnicity, one of the things that is really important about this whole design of the study is we were trying to understand why we see inequities by ethnic identity, however that ethnic identity is classified. So we were really committed to recruiting a cohort that could look at the diversity of our current births. And that is one of the things that sets the study apart from other historical studies in New Zealand and certainly from studies overseas. And it's one of the strengths of this study. So at recruitment, mums and dads told us, because as I just said, that doesn't necessarily mean this is what the children will tell us, but they told us that around about 25% of their children were expected to be Māori, around about 20% Pacific, around about 16% Asian, and many were expected to have multiple ethnicities, and those ethnicities have changed over time. We have demonstrated after that recruitment, because there is no register of pregnancy or births, so we had to do it afterwards. We used 5 years of births before to try and make sure we were getting a representative group of births. But it wasn't until 2012, 2013 that we could actually go back and calibrate. So there is a paper that looks at how this group of children calibrate to all births in New Zealand at that time point. Around about 11% of all the births that occurred in 2009 and 10. And actually they compare pretty well on ethnic diversity, on socioeconomic diversity, on maternal age, on parity, and various other characteristics that we can get from routine data, which is helpful when you're looking at how generalizable is this information, because you can then go back and say, how does this cohort relate to all children, and obviously take attrition into account in that as well. And that's what the last bullet point says, and Sarah will speak to that a little more. Here's another cartoon that just talks about the multidisciplinary aspect of the study. So this is, when you look at the data, this is the sort of information we are wanting to collect from the parents and also from the children themselves. So we want to know about who's in their family, who's in their household, how is it changing over time, who are those people, where have they come from, what values are important to them. The societal context is a shorthand for our SCON, societal context, neighbourhood and environment. So that's a big one. It's all about how these families and the children engage with their wider communities and their wider neighbourhoods. That's an important domain. Education that sits there and looks quite straightforward is becoming more and more complicated over time. Firstly, we're interested in parental aspirations for their children. Then we're interested in ECE and how the children have progressed through that. And now we're into formal schooling. So how are the children doing and how are they feeling about their educational achievements and aspirations? Health and wellbeing is a big area. We're very interested in holistic wellbeing, which is great because it's fitting in really nicely with a whole lot of the priorities in terms of lots of government agencies. Sorry about that for those of you on the screen, but those of you on Zoom, sorry. So that's a big one. There's a lot of information there, and we have got some linkages to some of the health data that is collected routinely that is now integrated into the data set as well. So you can see some of things about hospital admissions and so on that will be helpful, hopefully, and immunisations. Then we have a really important and huge domain as well, psychosocial developments, which includes peer behaviours, it includes self-regulation, it includes how these children have pro-social behaviour more generally, and it's also about their relationships with not only their peers, but with their families and with wider environment, and how they are connected really, which is increasingly important, particularly for a group of children who are digital natives. So that's that big domain. And the last one, culture and identity, I've talked about quite a bit. That's where we think about not just one ethnic identity, but what it means to be engaged or to identify with one particular group. And we have a whole set of questions that we ask about culture and identity of the parents and now of the children themselves. The horizontal bars just represent the largest groups in our studies, the ones for which we have some statistical power to look at outcomes for. So while we have up to 85 ethnicities in the study, we don't have statistical power to break that down into all of those groups. But when the study was set up, certainly for those research questions that I showed you right at the beginning, we had statistical power to look at outcomes that were occurring in the population at a rate that was greater than 5%. So this is not a study that is designed to look at real outcomes. So going back to my very first comment, it's a population study. It's looking at what shapes normal development over time, not what is shaping some rare outcome or something that occurs in 1 or 2% of the population. We don't have the capacity to answer that with this study. It's more looking at what is happening right across this group of children who represent the diversity of our current births and our current children. So just finally, and this is a brief talk about something that is really important, and you'll probably need to spend a bit more time on this when you're looking at putting together your particular research applications, your research questions. One of the things that is really important in this study is maintaining relationships with our participants. The trust that they have in us, the guardianship that we all share in terms of how we use this data, whoever is using it, is critically important because it's a longitudinal study, because we want to keep these relationships and we want these people to keep sharing their stories and their information with us. So one of the things that guides that is our kaitiaki principle and the fact that we adhere to kaitiakitanga. And we do that throughout everything that we do. And we look for how you will be applying that in your particular piece of research. And we try and provide you with information to help you address the sorts of things that we're looking for and that MSD will be looking for when they look at these applications in terms of how you are respecting those relationships and particularly how you are respecting the fidelity of that information and respecting the individuals who've provided it. So that is something that's really important. We are absolutely, as I've said several times now, wanting to understand what is driving inequalities, but we are not in the blame game. We're not here to say that this group are bad and this group are great. We want to understand why we see those inequalities. We want to get beneath the idea that ethnicity somehow explains differences and get beneath it and understand what is happening and also what is working. Because actually in some of our groups who are maybe not the most populous in our population, they're actually doing really well. They may be just doing it in a different way than some of the other groups. So we want to understand that because that can be really important for policy as well. So there are a few guidelines really that we expect that you will follow for and that we all have to follow too in terms of when we collect this data and when we use it and when we report on it. And so a lot of what will happen with the data access process, which Alana talked about as one of the processes in this application, is that we will be looking, or that committee will be looking very closely at how this kaitiaki principle is being protected in your research applications. And that's the case for all research questions and applications. So basically the data that is contributed by all our participants, but particularly by our Māori participants, is a treasure. And actually is something that we need to hold dear. It is owned by them, not by us. So they own their data, we are the guardians of it. And so everything we do, we want to be respectful of that, the fact that we are using this information that people have generously shared with us. So that's what we're looking for when we look at this principle. And it does apply obviously to our Māori participants, but it equally applies right across the cohort. So we've given you some questions that you can ask of your proposal, of your research question, and they're just listed here, and I'm not going to read them out for you. They're available for you in the access form, and we'll make these slides available for you too, so that you can look through them. But we've tried to actually help you to address these questions, to think about some of these things and what they mean for your research. And if you can answer these in your applications, you're well on the way to getting to a point where we can understand how you are thinking about this, how MSD can understand how you're thinking about it, how policy groups can, and to understand that that is going to be a really good piece of research using this, these data sets, which are getting larger and more complex over time, which Avanish will talk to you about. And there's some examples there, about basically this idea of how you think if you're going to do analyses that you want to stratify, say, on ethnicity. Firstly, which ethnicity variable do you think you'll use? Because I've already tried to share with you at a very high level some of the complexity in that. So we need you to think about that and answer that. And then how do you think you will use it as a variable in your models and your research methodology? And then what will you do with the sort of interpretation of that? How will you get advice from cultural advisors? And you can, again, talk to MSD, you can talk to our team about helping you out with those processes if you would like to discuss them further. And then in our process as well, because this is a longitudinal study, before things go out as well, there is a process of just checking that a kaitiaki principle has been adhered to, alongside things like privacy and sustainability, which are the other two principles that we have for any data access. So we want to keep the study going. We want people to keep wanting to share their information with us over time, and we want to respect their ownership of their own data and the sensitive information that they share with us. So those are things that we just look at before something goes out publicly to make sure that those participants are being respected in the way that we had promised they would be when they came into the study, which I'm sure is something that everybody here is committed to. So again, if you need any sort of discussion or help with that, we'd be very happy to help you. Okay. So that's the background in a nutshell. Happy to take any quick questions. Otherwise, I'll hand over to Sarah to talk to you specifically about the 8-year, which is the new one. Oh, all right, good. Thanks, Sarah.
Great, thank you so much, Susan. That's given us lots of food for thought when we put together research questions for these applications. So that's great. And Susan will be available to answer questions at the end as well. So I'm going to just go into a lot more detail now about the types of data we've collected. As Susan said, this is multidisciplinary study. There's a lot in there, and this slide here just goes over the different data collection waves, or DCW, whenever you see that in the documentation. So we started antenatally, as Susan said. Then the mother was interviewed with a CAPI, which is the computer-assisted personal interviewing. So in the home, had an interviewer sitting there asking them questions, and then they record that into the electronic format. Come on in. The partner was, if they were available, was also interviewed at that time using the same process. Then perinatally, so just after the child was born, we had the linkage to the, actually it was done a bit later, but the perinatal data was linked to this data set as well, and that's in there. Then at 6 weeks, there was a telephone call. So you'll see further down the list here, we've got the mother had a CATI, which is just this computer-assisted telephone interviewing, phone interview to collect information about how the birth went. Then at 35 weeks, again, another telephone call. 9 months, we could go back into the home and talk to them then. So that's the largest kind of data collection wave in that first year of life, is the 9-month data set. That was the mother again, and the partner, if available, to be interviewed face to face. So there is some data linkage data in there from the hospitalizations at 12 months of age as well. Continuing on, at 16 months, another telephone call to keep in touch with the family and collect a bit more information about how their child's development was going. And again, at 23 months. Next big data collection wave is 2-year, and you'll see that was a large data set where we went back into the homes when the child was 24 months old. Mother interviewed again, and the partner. There's also, you'll see further down, there's one called child with a little hash after it, and that's the measurements. So that was when we collected their height, weight, waist circumference was added at 5 as well. So the anthropometric variables, and then also data linkage to the hospitalizations at 2. Then 31 months and 45 months was another telephone call. And in those data sets, you'll see there's a lot more information asked about childcare. So if you're particularly interested in the ECE variables, the 31-month and 45-month data sets have more there. Then 54 months was again back into the home. So this is now 4.5 years of age, just before they're going to school. This is quite an important time period to capture that transition to school, how they'd done in preschool up to that point as well, and whether they were ready for school. So that 54-month, there was a long interview with the mum in the home, and again, the child measurements were taken and other observations of the child's development. I'll go into detail about those again soon. We started at that age, 54 months to collect child samples as well, and you'll see that in the row. So that's the throat, nose and elbow swabs, microbiological samples, plus a saliva sample for their DNA. You'll see also at the perinatal, there's a bit of information there that's from the Guthrie cards. So I'll talk more about the availability of that data, but that's not included in the data sets for wide release. So if you'd like to use this child sample data, get in touch with us, okay? So we can, because that's really special information, obviously, the privacy of the individual needs to be really taken into account. We need you to work with us to collaborate if you'd like to use that data. And then there's also the data linkage to routine records as well for 54 months. At 8 years of age, that's, as Susan said, the very exciting one. Oh, we seem to have lost a dot. The mum was also interviewed at 8, except, oh, here it is down here. Sorry, we added in the mum was interviewed, but this time it was an electronic self-complete. So these 2 rows here around the mother and partner, electronic is the self-complete questionnaire from the mother, the partner at 72. And the child was interviewed in the home at the 8 years of age with using CAPI. And again, we have our measurements down there for 8. This screen you won't be able to read, but as we said, we're recording this and the PowerPoint will be made available to you as well. We'll send it round. We just wanted to go over all the different topics. So if you are particularly looking for something, you can come back to the screen and see if you can find it in the list, okay? As we said, you know, there's a lot in here and you'll be coming from your own discipline and interested in different bits. So have a look, but I wanted to briefly point out about how we have, you know, the demographic information of the family, lots on employment and income. There's heaps on health and other government service use, so interactions with government agencies. Housing and neighbourhood, quite a lot collected there on housing. In fact, it goes up over to the next bit here. Culture and identity, Susan's already touched on, lots there. The child's sleep, activity and diet, here's the type of things we've collected. And child health and wellbeing kind of topics are listed there. The mother's health and well-being, there's quite a lot there. So you might want to think about using some of those variables too. Family relationships and support. You'll see there's actually a lot in there. So definitely check out all those topics too and think about whether they're related to your research question. And right down the bottom here, we've got child's emotional and social development, which is actually quite a large section of the questionnaires. And what's not shown in this diagram here is the information about the partners of the mother as well, which you can check out these data sets if you'd like to know more about the dads of the children or the partners of the mothers at these points. So how you search within the data, hopefully you've already had a look around our website, but definitely start with that. I'd also just start with the Now We Are reports for the age group you're interested in and have a flick through and see what was already reported there. Then come to the website, www.growingup.co.nz, and have a look here on the available data page. So to get to that, you go to Using Growing Up data and then click on available data. And here particularly we have a data dictionary in one searchable file. So that's an Excel, Microsoft Excel file that downloads to your computer and you can literally, you know, find what you're looking for. Do the find, Control F and put in your search terms for things you're interested in. So for example, if sleep is your research question, put in sleep, put in bed, put in, you know, just key terms and see what comes up. That will search right through all the data sets we have to tell you what's available right now. So it makes it super easy for you. Then the other thing you'll really want to check out, which is also on this available data page, are the research projects that have already happened in this space. You obviously don't want to be repeating and we don't want you to have to reinvent the wheel as well. It's best to kind of launch off what other people have already done. So click on the research projects and click also on that, oops, I went to the wrong one. Click also on that one there, which has the reports that have already, and publications that have already been published. We're actually just updating those pages in the website. So you might, if you've already looked at them and they only go to about 2018, do refresh and have a look, because there are a lot more publications in the last couple of years that are just now being added to our website. So come back to this, I would say, and keep checking, or maybe even flick us an email to say, have you got anything more recent on whatever tool you're interested in using, or whichever data set you're looking at, and we can point you in the right direction of our named investigators, particularly, who have been working to get results out there. The other thing you will want to check out, which Shalana mentioned, is these project topics and reports that have already used the Children and Families Research Fund. So on the MSD website, you can come to this link here and see what's been funded previously and the reports that are available from that. So it gives you an idea of the kind of topics that policy is interested in as well. But again, just making sure you're not proposing something that's already been funded. This is a big slide too, and I'm going to work through it kind of slowly, but we wanted to make it really clear to you what's available for you to use out of what we've collected to date. So on the left-hand side here, these are the tools, and they're mostly, they're mostly the outcome tools people use, but you'll see, there's a lot more in the data dictionaries, but this is just kind of giving you a flavour for what's there. So we've worked through right here, we've got stack and topple from our second year. These are kind of these observations that we did with the children of how are they developing. So that one's that they had to stack some blocks, okay? And then there's a child behaviour questionnaire at the 5-year DCW when they're 4.5. The SDQ is the Strengths and Difficulties questionnaire that's often used a lot. That was at 2, 5 and 8. You'll see the next one over is the next column there over, sorry, is the technical documentation that's still in progress. That means we're still validating it and writing it up for you. Gift wrap task at 5, this was where the child had to turn away as the interviewer was wrapping a gift for them, and we recorded if they peeked or how long it took them to peek. Then there's effective knowledge task, the DIBBLES, which is a letter naming fluency task, hand clap task, and they clap at 5, the name and numbers task. So these ones are all getting it, are they ready for school? You know, what skills have they picked up before this, before they start school? And also parent-child interactions are available from the some derived variables from the DCW5. So this is where the mother, generally, the primary caregiver, is having a conversation with the child. The NIH toolbox, we have cognitive battery tests from the 8-year DCW. And this one I had a special little note for here because we have psychometric testing, which has already been published on that. So if you're wanting to use that, make sure you check out the manuscript. And I specifically noted it because it's just not up on the website yet, but it will be soon. But the other ones here, all of these up to that point, do go to the data user guide, which also has the manuscripts, which have the cognitive testing in them, the psychometric testing, and of how the tool went. So you can see what's already been written about that tool. How effectively was it working with the New Zealand population? That's what we're most interested in exploring in those things. You know, a lot of these tools have been developed overseas and maybe modified or adapted for the New Zealand context. So you want to check out the manuscripts that have been written by the named investigators and our research team to see how did they perform with our sample across the different ethnic groups we've got in our study. Then the last one here, the kids screen, this is a quality of life tool, which we've also just added. The thing with the kids screen and the NIH is that they are, what's the right word? There's a copyright on the questionnaire. So to actually see the questionnaires, they're not included in the documentation available publicly on the website, but you can contact us and we'll give you the questionnaires, and then that data will be added and the questionnaire itself to your data folder that you'll get if you're a successful, if you have a successful project, you get your own data folder, and we'll add that to your data folder. Checked with biostats that we can do that. Now, this next column here, these are the tools which we're working on currently to check the psychometric testing for and how they're performing, and to give you kind of tips and tricks for when you use them. We're going to make sure the ones in this column in the middle are available for your round. So by the time you put in your data access application in October, remember you get, Alana said about the timing, you'll get told early October, I think it is, that if you've been successful, you write up your application. We'll make sure that these ones are available on our website for you to look at the technical documentation and think a bit more fully. So you will be able to use these ones. So this is the Peabody Picture Vocabulary Test at Data Collection Wave 5, the anthropometric variables I mentioned before, the height, weight and waist, also the birth data on birth weight, etc. All of that's there. The strengths and difficulties, oops, I keep doing that. Strengths and difficulties at 8, we're just finishing writing up the testing for that. The NZI DEP, which is a measure of individual deprivation, is at year 2 and year 5. That documentation will be finished, and the depression scale at 8 as well, that's child depression. So, again, we've just got the little notes there for you to check out. Now, there are still some of our tools where the data we've collected where we haven't got it quite ready yet, because the analyses are either quite complex to get them ready for you to use, like the cleaning involved, or the validation is still underway. So some examples of that is accelerometry. We attached accelerometers to the children at 8 and they wore them for 2 days, which is quite exciting, but that data is currently being analysed, and the derived variables written up for the technical documentation, and also our time use diaries where the children completed information about what they did during the day. Those are not currently being analysed, sorry, they still need someone to analyse them, but the accelerometry is underway. The Tereo tool, it's also being analysed currently, so not available. The Promise, Anxiety and Fear tool. The Fear tool is part of the NIH toolbox with some promise variables, and that also is about to be written up. So these ones should be available next year, we were thinking, we're hoping for most of them, but just not available during this round. And then the parent-child interaction from 8, so that's the audio of remember the primary caregiver talking to the child, that one's also just being coded. The Vineland's socialization domain, and the impulsivity scale, and the sticker game, pro-social. So those ones there don't include in your applications basically, but these ones in the middle column, we'd be happy to receive applications using those data. And these ones here definitely are available, and there's a lot more information on them in the data user guides. Again, with that, if there's anything you'd like to discuss further, do come and see us. Also contact us if you're interested in this microbiology data. And as I said, we can do the collaboration projects with you using our in-house data for those ones. But they're, yeah, not for the CFRF round. So that's a lot of information to take in. Yeah, there's heaps of documentation to read on it too. I'm just trying to point you in the right direction with them. So a couple of things about the 8-year, which we wanted you to be aware of when you're also completing your applications, is that for the 8-year data collection, we had, well, actually before 8-year, I should first of all say, at 9 months, 24 months and 54 months, you know, those in-home visits that we did to collect the data, they have a small age range for those interviews. They're generally 1 to 2 months either side of that month. So of the 9 month, 24 month and 54 month, the child is is very close to that age. So, but with the 8-year, there's a wider age range. So if you're specifically interested in 8-year-olds, make sure you check out this age distribution in the data as well while you're analysing it, because the 8-year had a 2-phased data collection approach due to funding issues. So there was a field collection kicked off. This is time along the bottom here, or the age of the child. And so there are a lot of them around this 8-year period. Then more funding kicked in, and we could do more of them later. So that's just something to be aware of. The mean age of the children is 8.6 years, but it has quite a wide range here from 7.9 through to 9.8, basically, years old. And as Susan said, the children completed their questionnaires for the first time themselves at 8, and some free text there and lots of exciting things about how they view their life. That's included in the 8-year. We've got a slide here on retention to the 8-year, and this is going to be important when you're writing up your results, obviously, to say about how, whoever was included at your time period. So you can come back to this slide then. But the big things to get across at the moment is that we have 76% of our original cohort who had completed all of the face-to-face interviews. So you do get that consistency in longitudinal data collected over time, with just over 5,000 or 5,200 of them. And then at the 8-year, we had 5,556 of the children who participated in that wave. So these are really quite incredible retention rates compared with other longitudinal studies. We're really pleased that our families are still happy to keep continuing to be interviewed and have us come along. So you'll just want to check out the details in this slide when you get a chance. We do have some children who have died, unfortunately, at each wave, and then others that have opted out, which means the family has said that they no longer want to be part of the study. But these are pretty small numbers, really. And the skipped here are families who say that they don't want to take part in that data collection wave, but they're happy to still be involved in the study, so we can come back. Just that was a particularly hard time to pin down an interview. Okay, that's me, and we're nearly ready for our morning tea break. But are there any questions on those slides before we break for the morning tea? I'm not sure how to see the Zoom people giving talks too, so hopefully Joey can. Oh, kia ora. Oh, we have. Oh, Joey's not here, but when we have a question, sorry, we need to have you talk into the microphone because our technical support's gone. And there we go. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. That was very interesting. Can I just ask a very specific question in terms of the data linkage stuff for your, I think it was collection wave 5.
Back here. Yep.
Did you link with the before school check Ministry of Health data?
We do, but it's not on the external data set. So how to access that? Who wants to answer that question? That would be an internal collaboration. I think it's quite difficult to use that data in this data set. So
there is a student who's just completed work.
Yeah, using the
will be included in your derived variables.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So she's, sorry for those of you who can't hear on the screen because I don't think you can hear Susan. So with the before school check data, yep, there's a student who's looking at the overlap between like our height and weight, for example, and the height and weight collected in before school check and the other data there, the SDQ. So when we have those derived variables from her work, that will be added. But that's also probably in that column of, yeah, the not available this round, sorry. Yeah, we should add that one.
Okay, thank you.
Probably you'll come up with some more too that I've missed out on this table. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Up there, Susan wants to add more.
Sorry,
No,
just
it's helpful.
there is a lot of information though collected from parental report about engagement with before school check and about referrals and follow-ups and other pieces of information. So you can utilise that information that is in the data sets. Yeah.
Yes, that's true. The whether or not they had a before school check. Yeah. It's just the actual before school check data that's not in there. Yeah. Okay. Kia ora koutou. Thank you. Welcome back. Just making sure everyone's got their food. Okay, I'm going to pass over now to Avinash Pillai, who's our data analytics manager or biostatistician on the team. And he's going to talk us through some of the intricacies of our data sets and the data dictionaries and the data user guides, all of which we want to get you familiar with so you can put in the best possible application. Okay, I'll hand over to Avinash now.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Sarah. Well, hello, everyone. So I'm Avinash Pillai. I'm the data analytics manager, but what that really means is I look after the biostatistics and the data access for growing up in New Zealand. And I'm supported by a great team. Well, I think I have about 25 minutes to 30 minutes. So what I was going to cover today is basically I will go through the technical documentation you need to put your proposal together. I'll go through the growing up in New Zealand data sets and what they look like to give you a flavor for how complex they are and how to structure your proposals. And I'll also talk a little bit about the data access process, but from the growing up in New Zealand point of view, to give you an idea of timings when you do submit your application to growing up in New Zealand. Okay. And there'll be lots of time at the end for questions. It's okay, do I just?
I'm worried it's not showing.
Yeah, how do I?
Just double check that people on Zoom can see the slides.
How do I do that?
Could you just ask them?
Can everyone on Zoom see the slides?
No,
No.
no.
Good question. Nisha?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And
No, just click on the your share, screen sharing is full, is yellow, right at the top.
Underneath the black one.
Yeah, yeah.
that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, doesn't seem to, right? No. Yeah, no way.
Okay. See that arrow? Oh, yeah. There we
Can
go.
everyone see it now? Yep.
Yep.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
All right.
Sorry.
Okay, so always start with this slide. It's basically what we do with all the data that comes into growing up in New Zealand. So as you've heard, we have an enormous amount of data that we've collected over the last 12 years and through many data collection waves. But this is just to give you a flavor of the process that we go through to create our final data sets fit for research purposes. Now, I'll just mention that a great deal of effort goes in behind the scenes and a great many teams are involved in curating these data sets, specifically field operations, the research team, the data management team, and the biostats team. But the end result, as you can see, is to create final data sets that are useful to our researchers. Okay, so this slide is here to give you an idea of the data collection waves that we've been through and the data sets that we have received. So each cylinder here is a questionnaire that was asked of our mothers, children, and the partners at each collection wave. So up the top, you can see we start from data collection wave 0 and go up all the way through to data collection wave 8. And as you can see, there are many sources of data. But this is just to give you a flavor of how complex the data sets are. Okay, so as Sarah mentioned previously, we have asked questions of the mother. We have asked questions of the partner. We have collected information about the growing up in New Zealand child provided by their mother. Questions about the growing up in New Zealand child provided by the mother's partner, and the mother's partner can potentially change throughout the study. We have information collected about the growing up in New Zealand child by the interviewer, so child observations. And we also have information about the growing up in New Zealand child provided by the children themselves. So many pieces of information collected from collected from the mother, the partner, and the children, and the interviewers across the course of all our data collection waves. Okay, so how do we make sense of all these bits of pieces of information collected, right? We need to have some sort of naming convention. Okay, so as you can see down that first column, it goes from data collection wave 0 all the way up to 8. It gives you the data set name. And then the most important thing to remember from this slide is that every collection wave has a suffix. Yeah. So if you look at the fourth column, the variable suffix, _am, if you see anything in our data sets with _am or in our technical documentation, it means that it's from the antenatal period and it's from the mother. Okay. And in that same regard, anything _ap is from the partner at the antenatal time point. Okay. Now, as you can see, there's many pieces of information collected from the mother. So at antenatal, we've got information at DCW2 from the mother. We have information at DCW5 from the mother and at 8 from the mother. But the suffix is your best friend when trying to make sense of all these pieces of information. Okay. Okay, another way to see the same thing, and this slide is, so a couple of things to emphasize on this slide. This gives you an idea of the data sets that are available. The most important thing to take away from this slide is that this is, and as Susan has said previously, this is a child-focused study. And so all our data sets are linkable by the child ID. Okay, so that's really important to remember. You can ask questions about information we've collected from the mothers, and you can see the data sets listed here that has the mother ID in them. But all these data sets are linkable by the child ID. The arrows here are intended to show you the relationships between each data set. So you can have a relationship between the same child across data collection waves. You can have a relationship between the child and the mother across data collection waves. It might not be the same relationship, as mothers have also changed over time. You can look at the relationships between the mother and the partner over time. And again, be aware that that relationship changes. So this diagram, I think, will be very useful when you have to refer back when doing your proposal. Okay. All right. Let's get on to some technical documentation. You've seen this slide, Sarah. You've had this slide up before. But if you click on available data on our website and click on agree, you'll see a table with all our questionnaires, all our data dictionaries, and our user guides. And as Sarah said, just yesterday, we've uploaded a searchable data dictionary for you. So it is an Excel file with all our data dictionaries across all collection waves searchable. Now it is very useful to be able to search for something, say, like ethnicity across time. And it'll tell you which variables It'll tell you which variables you have over time related to ethnicity. But one thing to keep in mind is you really need to look at the questionnaires as well to get a real flavor for how that question was asked and the response categories present. So don't look at the data dictionaries on their own. Please have a look at the questionnaires as well. Okay, so these are, sorry, let me just step off here. So these documents are always on my desk because these are things I refer to all the time. The data user guide, the questionnaires, and this is the Now We Are 8 report. But please have a look at our website, familiarize yourself with these documents. The data user guide is actually, the data user guide is actually your best friend. There's a whole lot of information in there and a whole lot of really useful information about the tools and scales that we've used through all our collection waves, decisions we've made on how to anonymize data, and basically a whole lot of technical information which you'll need. The questionnaires are also very useful, and I'll come to the data dictionaries. Okay, when it comes time to send your data access application to us, you'll need the data access forms, which are on our website, and it's also in the pack on the MSD website as well. So have a look at that. And I've included that email address there. So please send us any queries you have that you think we might be able to help with, and we can get our respective teams to then make contact with you and see if we can help you with your application. So you have that resource. Okay, as I said, the data user guide, it's packed with very useful information. It shows you the structure and content of all our data sets. It gives you information on how to link these data sets across waves, and it gives you information on tools and scales used in the data collection waves as well. And as Sarah said, the table that you saw previously, we will keep making technical documentation available on our website about these tools and scales as we process them. Okay, so just an example of a data dictionary that you'll see on our website. I'm sure many of you have already looked at our data dictionaries and have seen this, but I thought I would just go through it very quickly again. Two sort of newish bits of information in our data dictionaries are the last two columns. I don't know if all of you can see this, but the last column is called missing and missing percentage. And so this is the 8-year mother data dictionary. So for every question in the 8-year mother questionnaire, you have a number here for each question, and each question then shows you the number missing at the end. Now missing is a little bit misleading. It just means that you know, for whatever reason, the question, the response was empty. So have a look. Pay particular attention to the last two columns because this will really help you to prepare your proposal as well. Okay, and these are the fields in there. So every data dictionary has a question number. It lists the research domain, the question as it appears in our questionnaires, the variable name that it has in our data sets, if any formats are applied to those data values, and short labels. It tells you the type of variable and notes if there's anything that we've done to those variables, and then the number of missings. Okay. Okay, I'm just very quickly going to go through a couple of examples on how to use our data sets. And this is intended to just give you a flavor of how easy or how complex research questions can be. Now, you've all heard Alana say that you need a good research question, a policy relevant research question. Now, of course, that's up to you, but a good policy relevant research question will probably use many data from many collection waves over time, right? So I'll just go through a couple of examples, mainly from the 8-year report, just to give you a flavor of how easy or how hard it can be. Okay, so we have about 18 data sets in total. The main thing you'll need to consider for your research is which time point do you want to focus on? Okay. And the only way you can answer that question is to have a look at our data dictionaries and questionnaires. Something very important to consider is missing data. If your question is just looking at a point in time, it'll be straightforward, but you really need to consider missing data across multiple time points. You will need to combine data sets, merge many different data sets together. So many different pieces of information from many different sources. It's easy to get very different denominators. So you really need to think what your research question is and the population that you're trying to target. Okay. And then ask yourself, do I have the correct denominator or not? And when looking through our technical documentation, just be aware of, you know, missing data that arise from things like 98 or 99, don't know. Just a hint, there are many data sets, but when it's time to do your analysis, it always pays to keep only the variables you need in the data set you've created, right? This list is coming to me from previously asked questions that I've gotten from previous research proposals. Okay, let's go through some examples. So generically define your research question, decide what data you need, decide how you link this data, and please remember that the child ID is the primary merging key because this is a child-focused study. Okay, let's go through example 1. So example 1, very quickly, is from our Now We Are 8 report. It is on page 13. The question is, how many children are allowed to cross the road alone? And this might very well be a research question that you might, come up with. Okay, so you've defined your question. What data sources do I need? Okay, I'm going to focus on the 8-year mother data because that's the question. That's when the question was asked. Now I've got my data source. What variables do I need? Okay, the variable for that question is SF29 underscore Y8M, and I know it's from the 8-year mother data set because the suffix says Y8M, yeah, year 8 mother. And you can see what the answer is. From that question, everyone who said yes over the total number for that question. Okay, very straightforward. Example 2, again from page 13 of the Now We Are 8 report. How many children, how many children lived in a damp or moldy home? Okay, so again, I'm going to use my data source. It's the 8-year mother data. I've defined the variable I'm going to focus on. And again, it's pretty straightforward. All who had problem with dampness or mold over the total number for that question. Okay, so far it's cross-sectional, it's straightforward, it's easy to define. Okay, let's go to example 3. So example 3 is from page 80 of a Now We Are 8 report. And this is my research question, right? It says, what does residential mobility between birth and 8 years of age look like? Okay. Well, the very first thing I have to do is say, what does residential mobility mean, right? Does it mean how many times children have moved? How many times mothers have moved? What data sources do I need? And so you can see here, we've asked questions on residential mobility in many different ways at many different time points. So we have a lot of information on residential mobility, right? We have information in the 9-month data set, in the 2-year data set. We asked the question at 54 months. We've got some information at 72 months from mothers, and we have information at 8-year. And so you really need to look at the data dictionaries, find all the variables you want related to your research question and combine them together. And as you can see, there are quite a few variables there that I need to extract from these data sets. continuing on. So suddenly I'm having to merge data sets across time. Well, I've identified the variables I need to merge these data sets. How do I do it? Okay. Oh, hang on, I've just remembered. As well as residential mobility, I also need some other information, right? I need child gender, I need ethnicity, I need the mother's age group, and I need education, plus a whole bunch of other stuff. So you'll need to identify where you're going to get all this information from. Now I need to merge these data sets. Hang on, I said this was a child-focused study, right? But I've asked these questions of the mother. So I'm going to use the mother ID to merge these data sets, okay? I've merged them together now, great. I've got my data set, what do I do now? Okay, well, I've got to create a variable from combining all these residential mobility questions, and then I've got to categorize this variable into moved or not moved, right? To answer my research question. Okay, I've done that, and I've got a whole bunch of missings. Well, I can't do anything with that, so I've got to exclude these non-responses, right? Okay, and now I've got a variable there that says whether families have moved or not. It's a variable that goes from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I have 4,504 mothers in my data set. And I've just got a question there for you. If we did not exclude non-responses, what would the denominator be, right? It'll be much higher, but it'll be missings in there. And so, okay, I've suddenly decided this is not my research question. I'm going to focus on something else, right? But it's just to give you a flavor of the process you have to go through to think about the research question for your proposal. Okay, carrying on. I'll touch very briefly on the data access process, but this is from the Growing Up in New Zealand point of view. In the MSD data pack, this is explained very nicely as well, but I just wanted to show you this and sort of focus on the timings associated with a couple of these boxes. Okay, so you're all attending a data access workshop now. You can watch the recording online. I think, Sarah, you mentioned October this year. So you'll complete your application for Growing Up in New Zealand, so data access application in October. You send it to us. We do a quick quality check of your application, and that involves, at this stage, as far as I'm aware, checking to see that you filled all the relevant fields that need to be filled in, checking that the data that you've asked for your application is actually available, and all those sort of admin type things. We'll do the quality check. It gets sent to our data access committee for review and approval at the November meeting. After that, you let's say it's everything's good, it's all reviewed and approved. You sign your contracts with MSD, Growing Up in New Zealand, and Uni Services. And then it's on to creating a user account with the university, getting onboarded to our e-research platform, and then scheduling an onboarding support session with me to walk you through how to use the system. Just going back up this list, from submitting your application to Growing Up in New Zealand to review and approval by the Data Access Committee, it's about 20 working days for those two boxes by the time you know whether your application has been reviewed or not, and our data access coordinator will let you know. Once your contract is signed, and from when you have to create a user account to scheduling an onboarding support session with me, that's about 20 working days as well. So hopefully that kind of gives you an idea of the timelines associated with each of these boxes and how long before you can actually get onto the e-research platform and start actually doing stuff from there. If any of you have any questions about the timelines associated with these boxes, just feel free to email data access and Growing Up, and we'll get back to you. I'll just very quickly mention our data access protocol. So this is available on our website. And the reason I'm focusing on this is because Susan has highlighted the importance of the Kaitiaki guardianship principle. And so please have a look at our data access protocol. It sets out why we have to safeguard the privacy of our participants, how we ensure the sustainability of the project, and quite importantly, the role and function of the Data Access Committee. So it's well worth familiarizing yourself with that document. Now, just a couple of things to wrap up. When you are preparing your proposal, think very carefully about having someone on your application who is familiar with data analysis, who is familiar with how to work with many data sets across time, and how to merge things and how to do simple analyses. That will really help. There is a training component in each grant from MSD, I think, if I'm not, yep. So you can use that. I'm not sure exactly how much that is, but you can use that to train someone in, say, an analyst to get up to speed with the growing up in New Zealand data. One thing I will mention is the software that you have available to you for the CFRF applications. Software you have available to you to use is SPSS, Stata, and R. So keep that in mind when you, no. So the software that we have are SPSS, Stata, and R. So that will inform you of the type of analyst you need on your application. Okay. And I realize this is probably quite a big undertaking for some, especially our new our new users. But if you do have any questions that we can help you with while you're putting your proposal together, please email us at Data Access, and we will get we will try and answer all your questions and clarify anything to help you put your application together. Okay, that's me.
Right, are there any further questions from anybody here or on the Zoom? Joey would need to read those out, perhaps. Just wait and see. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, feel free to unmute yourself if you're on the screen here. We've still got a few of you here. Oh, thanks, Joey. Yeah, that's awesome. And then, yeah, Joey's going to bring that around to anyone who's here. That will give you lots to think about. Any questions? All ready to go away and fill in the forms? Brilliant. Yeah, that is a good point. Susan just mentioned about our multips, and you might have noticed on that screen that she had, she said there's more children in the study than mothers. And how did that happen? Unfortunately.
Thanks, Sarah. Just thinking we normally talk about this at the workshop, but we kind of didn't touch on it today. And so we do have some multiple births in the data sets, around about 200 children who are multips, or 200 sets of twins. There are a couple of triplets, but they are highly identifiable, and so they get removed for all analyses because of privacy. But if you are going to link on mother ID, you need to know that there will be some clustering for those mothers who have more than one child. So another thing to think about, and you may want to exclude multips for that reason, or you may want to use a specific type of methodology that acknowledges the clustering on some of those mothers' IDs. So please be careful with that as well, because sometimes, and the other challenges, as I think we've already heard, is that mums change and dads change, but the children don't. So don't expect that you will see the same mother every time. So there really is a lot of sort of investigation that you need to just explore before you start. So just wanted to give you that heads up as well. You will know whether they're multips or not. We provide that information.
Yeah, tip for new users out there is it's with that mother changing. I mean, we refer to them as mothers, but they're really the primary caregiver of the child. But it was the mother who was recruited into the study at the start. But by the time you get to 8, it obviously, you know, there's whāngai children in there, there's all sorts going on. But you can see the relationship when you go into the data sets. There's the relationship of that mother to the child. So you'll be able to figure out if they're a grandparent or whoever. Did you want to say more on that?
Yeah, no, just they are the mothers. They're the biological mothers, and they're defined as mothers. They're not always the primary caregiver. So that is really important.
And that's true too. Yeah.
So you need to be, again, it's just the nature of the data set. We recruited in pregnancy. So we recruited pregnant women who were gendered as female, obviously, because of the way we recruited them. Some of those mums are now technically acting in a role that is different for whatever reason, but they are not necessarily, mum is not equivalent to primary caregiver in this cohort, and dad is not equivalent to secondary caregiver. That it is a continuity of the mothers over time or the person in that role. So again, we need to not call it primary caregiver because it's not, and it upsets our dads who are doing the caregiving at home, who are the partners. So it's kind of another nuance. There are many, many nuances that, just
to be aware of. Yeah. Anyone in the room who's a user who wants to give a tip as well for users? I think the hardest things I've come across is defining your ethnicity variable, trying to think that through. And often when you're ticking which data sets you want to use, you forget antenatal, and basically always ask for, even if you're looking at the 8-year data, ask for the antenatal mother particularly, because that's where a lot of the demographics are held. And you think, oh, mother's education, I needed that in my model and I didn't ask for that data set. So just be really aware of what your covariates are and think that through carefully. What do you want to use in your analysis? There's a lot of upfront planning, but that's why we don't get you to fill out the data access forms until you're actually successful in the round, because that data access form requires you to really think through the variables that you're going to want to use. Any other tips from our team in the room who've used the data too? You've thought of something, Avanish? Yep.
Okay, while you all think of questions to ask, so when you submit your data application to Growing Up in New Zealand for us to quality check, we will make sure that the variables you've asked for are available in our data sets, right? But what we can't tell you is what other variables you need for your research question. And that's a crucial thing to consider, is because we don't know, right? We can only tell you that the things you've asked for are available, but what else you need is really for you to
we might
decide on. Yeah.
We might, if we do notice something, we'll say, we definitely look out for that. And also, if we know that there's a master's student or a PhD student doing something on the topic, we'll let you know. But it's really up to you to look through those projects listed and just double check the overlap and get in touch. New Zealand's such a small research community. Get in touch with people and see about collaborations and, how you can, what questions did they have coming out of their research that they wish they could explore further, and do they want to, look into that with you as well. So that's a good tip. Yes, there's our named investigators are listed on the website. So these are, quite senior academics who have really thought through what should be collected in our data collection waves and why we collect that information. And then they also often use the data and analyze it as well. So check out who the named investigators are and get in contact with any of them if you'd like to talk through some of the tools or the data that's available. Okay, I think that's everything. Well, thank you so much for coming along and joining us. Oh, sorry,
just-
one last thing from Joey.
Sorry, one last thing. I will be sending out an online survey to everyone who attended.
Oh, yes.
So yes, please keep an eye out for those. Thank you.
Yes, we'll send that out, and that's it's very short and just allows us to better plan for our future workshops. So what other things did you want to hear about, or yeah, how you found it all. And yeah, thank you so much for everyone who's joined. This has been our largest data workshop to date, so I'm sure they're just going to get bigger and bigger as we go through each data collection wave. So kia ora koutou, thank you so much.